welcome. My name's Anthony Sequeira. I'll be your host for this episode where we're going to be talking about network standardization. Here to guide us through is our own Wes Bryan.
Hey, thank you, Anthony. Yeah, that's right. We're going to be talking about, well, what is the purpose of network standardization? We're going to talk about, a few of the some of them are U.S.-based organizations. A lot of them are international-based organizations. And I want to go ahead and preface this episode with the fact that this is a lot of flashcard material, okay? In networking, we like to, and I know Anthony's the same way, we talk about this all the time, man, we really want to get down and we want to configure stuff. We want to see the cables, we want to see the devices, we want to configure the network adapters, but at the end of the day, you have to know where to go when you need to look up information about specifications and things like interoperability. So network standardization does come into play here. I'm going to go ahead, Anthony, what do you say? And we kind of discuss why we want standardization.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. This seems like an important topic. I mean, we want vendor interoperability, right? We want the stuff from Cisco to be able to coexist and work with the stuff from Juniper, work with the stuff from Aruba networks. We want all this stuff to work together. So for me, Wes, that's one of the big reasons we love standardization.
Sure, absolutely. So you're going to go in our time machine. We're going to take a trip back in time, right? About around the 1980s, right? It was a free-for-all when it came to network communications because everybody was trying to come up with the latest and greatest thing, and everybody had good ideas. A lot of different companies out there. IBM was out there, Microsoft was out there, Cisco basically cornered the market in technologies, 3Com, all these big companies, right? Everybody was doing something their own way, and in those days, if you bought into a specific vendor's brand, then that means you needed everything from them. You needed their protocols, you needed their devices, and that's a vendor lock, right? Well, what if you've got a network like Anthony says, and hey, we've got some Cisco devices here, but you know what? We've also bought into Juniper devices. Well, if you were back in those days, they would not play nice together, right? So we have a lot of these international, US-based and international bodies that said, hey, we're all making network technologies. Let's sit down, put these brilliant minds together, and let's find a commonality between them. And that, like Anthony said, at the end of the day, is why we want standardization. We want consistency and interoperability between two dissimilar systems, right? And up until we've had some of these standards, we didn't have that. Again, that's a long time ago, so we've had them for a very long time, but there is a reason we have them, and there's a reason we mention them to you, because if I was to tell you, and Anthony's going to put me on the test, and I'm going to fail pretty bad because he knows his network, but if I was to say, hey, RFC 1918, well, what does that mean? Why is it even important? Now, we'll fill you in on that, but you need to know what that is, who it came from, where you go to find that information, and why is it even important, right? And that's what we're going to show. I know it's a long intro there, but at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. This is flashcard material, so you could probably pause a lot of this video, write you some flashcards, and go ahead and memorize this information.
I'm going to be creating flashcards from your excellent student notes. I'm not kidding, right? So that's another way to go. You're providing such great notes, Wes, with this episode. Well, you provide great notes with every episode, but in this one, boy, oh boy, Wes's notes could help you compose those flashcards that you might want to use.
All right. So what do you say we dive in with the stuff that I consider kind of like push-ups, and I can't do a push-up to save my life.
Let's do it.
Right. So this is a little mental gymnastics that we have to go through. And let's go ahead. And what I told Anthony is, well, we're going to break these down, and there's no specific order in what we're doing these. I've tried to group them together in international organizations. It's not so cut and dry. So these first ones we want to talk about, I want to start with the ISO. All right, that is the International Organization of Standardization. I do not expect you to know these ISO numbers, but what I do want you to be aware of is that these numbers are important in the information technology industry, right? Why are they important? Well, the International Organization for Standardization, which is interesting because it's iOS, and it's like, well, they can standardize stuff, but they can't get the acronym for their name right. Well, it comes from a Greek word, isis, which means equality. And that's forms the basis. They're one of the largest organizations. I think they're 126 countries. And they form a large body of international standards. One of the biggest ones we want to talk about is the OSI model, and we will get into that, right? The OSI model, the Open Systems Interconnection model, that was developed, I want to say, in the mid-'80s, 85, I believe, right, as a consortium, a group of people that said, hey, let's get together, right, and let's standardize a common conceptual framework for network communications, right? So that's the ISO. Anthony, and please jump in here at any time. I believe this is one of the bigger ones that we should be aware of when it comes to anything in information technology, whether it's networking or anything.
Absolutely. And something fun that I'm going to do, you can tell what a nerd I am. This is fun for me, but I can't wait to, after this episode, to actually look up. Wes has for us in your student notes, Wes has the ISO document 7498-1. That is actually the OSI models documentation. I have never looked at that source document.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really fun to look at that official documentation for the OSI model.
That's great. And another thing we have to talk about too is to keep in mind that, when we talk about this thing, the internet, right? But the internet started out as a military network. It started out way back in the days, the ARPANET, right? The ARPA, the Advanced Research Project Agency, contracted the DoD, the Department of Defense, to make this closed off network for really just the United States government, about 5 universities. Stanford, I think, was one of them, but that was it. All right. So they contracted an organization called INA. All right, that's the next one in the list. And I want to mention them because as we go to the next one, it might get a little confusing. All right, so INA stands for the Internet Assigned Numbering Authority, right? And what they did is they formulated a lot of the framework for IP address allocation, our IPv4 address space, right? Our DNS namespace, our protocol and port assignments. You will still find them as the INA registered port value, well-known port ranges, right? They were the ones that started this. Now, today, they are actually a subcommittee. In the day, they were the committee, right? But in 1998, the United States president said, hey, we're going to sundown ARPANET as a private military thing, and I believe they implemented MILNET, which they still have today, and we're going to release ARPANET / the internet over to the public domain. Well, INA was contracted by the Department of Defense. So what they needed to do is find an organization that was made up of committees and groups that were internationally and globally recognized. And that's where something known as the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers come in. In fact, I'm just going to get rid of that because I'm having problems with it. All right. So they oversee now. They are the umbrella that oversees all of the functions in INA and many other functions, right? So if I need to know who oversees INA's allocation of a namespace? Well, ICANN. That's them, right? So ICANN coordinates and maintains those databases and the namespaces, but really what they're doing is they're really overseeing INA. That's INA's function, and ICANN oversees all of that. So I do want you to know about ICANN because it is important, right? You're going to learn as you go into other things like regional internet registrars. We're not going to talk about them here, but these two bodies, more so ICANN today, they're the ones that control this globally. But then moving down, we have another one. We have IDIF, all right? That's the Internet Engineering Task Force. This is another big one. In fact, this was one that Anthony and I were kind of talking about seriously and joking before we started the show. All right, so the Internet Engineering Task Force, what they do is they promote voluntary internet standards, and they do that through a lot of universities that will post what are known as requests for comments. These are the voluntary guidelines, right? The standards that basically are help us to comprise the entire internet protocol suite, otherwise known as TCP/IP. All right. The big thing is the request for comments. That's what I want you to know about IDIF. Because again, Anthony, if Anthony came to me and said, hey, Wes, I need you to tell me a little bit about this RFC 1918. I don't want to get into it too much, but that is the network address translation, the private IP address spacing that we follow today in network communications. That is a standard that was a request for comment by the Internet Engineering Task Force. Anthony, for you, being at the level that you've been doing this for so long, these RFCs, you reference them once in a while to know what is going on?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So in fact, of all of the standards bodies and all of the documents that we mentioned here, I mean, you you heard me earlier in this episode, I've never even looked at the official OSI document that gave us the OSI model, never even seen it.
Sure.
But RFCs, oh my goodness, I've read many of these start to finish. And check them out if you've never looked at one. They are very readable. I mean, they're going to have different authors. So, the readability of the document is going to be a kind of luck of the draw, but some of them are very, very readable. It's what I like to go to initially to learn some new technology. So yeah, RFCs, a great, great resource that's freely available for us.
Most definitely. So for instance, hey, I need to know, how does HTTP work?
That's right.
Well, it's documented. In fact, I have it here. RFC. I wouldn't know it either, Anthony. I'll tell you the truth. 2616. I wouldn't know that again. I'd have to Google it. I have to get the Googs out. But it tells you there it is.
Yeah. In fact, you just reminded me of a point I wanted to make. RFCs are often so readable and so well done that you see them plagiarized. This used to be a big problem. So I would go to read about RFC 1918, further reading, let's say, and I would find this text that all they did was copy the RFC, which, by the way, is not legal. It's just, I think a lot of people back then were like, oh, RFCs, I can just freely copy from them. And so you will see exact paragraphs or entire pages of content lifted from the RFC in some educational manual.
No kidding. That's interesting too. So, these are some of the international bodies that we have. We got another one. So that takes this block of four. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I understand it's just flashcard materials, but you can see, and I'm so glad to have Anthony here because he can help us to say, hey, some of these are very important. Here's another one that I want to talk about. And I'm going to go ahead and mention the IEEE. All right. When we mention the IEEE, all right, that's the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. All right. This is comprised of a variety of countries across the globe, and the IEEE formulates standards for networking communications. Maybe if you haven't, you will, guaranteed, if you haven't heard of something known as the 802 standard, right? That was a standard that it was started in February, second month of 1980. That's where 802 comes from. And what they had is they had companies like DEC. They had companies like Digital Equipment Corporation, Compaq, later become HP. They had Microsoft. They had all of these groups of bodies come together globally and formulate these standards. All right. The IEEE, maybe you've heard of some of these common 802 standards that we have. There's many more, and I could give you some other examples, but the big one, the 802.3, that is the working special interest group for the IEEE for Ethernet. 802.11. X, and I say X is a variable. That entire wireless standard, been out since 1999, was the very first standardized 802.11a. All of those variations, guess what? That all came from the IEEE, and there's many, many more that we could talk about. So for instance, any of you ever heard of something known as IEEE 1394? Haven't? Maybe, yeah, I think you have. You haven't heard of it maybe formally as IEEE 1394, but you've heard of FireWire, a marketing name for Apple versus the standardized protocol. All right. Have you ever heard of things like IEEE 1284? Probably not, because that's kind of gone by the wayside, but that's the old parallel cable standard, right? They work with electronics, electrical, and technical communications. Now, here's another one, ANSI. ANSI is an administrative body coordinated with inside of the United States. All right. That is the American National Standards Institute. They're the ones that actually endorse the one below it, TIA. Well, we'll get to TIA here in a second. You have probably seen some of the voluntary U.S. standards, whether you've realized it or not. The ASCII encoding that I have up there, guess what? That's an ANSI standard, right? It defines how we display and encode text, right? The next one is called TIA. Now, TIA used to be a combination of two groups. It would have been called EA. TIA, Technology Industry Association, Electronic Industry Alliance, I think is what it was called. But EAs no longer exist. EA was kind of absolved into the group. TIA is the Telecommunication Industry Association, and they do still exist. And they're the ones that are endorsed by the American National Standards Institute to do things like structured cabling. All right. Why is it important? If Anthony came to me right now and said, Wes, I need you to make a TIA 568B cable for that data center right now, I should know what that means. Or I need a 568A cable on one side and a 568B cable on another, or connection. Well, he just told me to make a crossover cable. Well, how do I know that? You need to know the specification, especially, to give you an example, the TIA-568, that's the structured building standard, if you will. Another one is FCC. I only put the FCC in here because they control a communication band that you will be working with a lot. Now, you might say, hey, I'm never going to work with a radio station. Absolutely, you probably aren't. But if you're going to work in networking, I guarantee you're going to work with the industrial, scientific, and medical band. That's the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum that is allocated by the FCC as an unlicensed band freely for commercial use. Now, I always say uni on this one because I don't actually know the acronym. The 5 gigahertz spectrum, guess what? That is allocated, it's now 6 gigahertz spectrum too, is allocated by the FCC. Those are the UNII bands. There is 1 through 8. Some of them we use, some of them we can't use. All of that comes from the Federal Communication Commission, right? And well, we know at the end of the day, some people like them, some people don't. All right, Anthony, I don't want to steamroll you here. Anything you would like to jump in and talk about?
No, I was just, you took the words right out of my mouth. I saw FCC and I'm like, my gosh, when do we, wireless.
Yes.
When we get involved with those standards.
Absolutely. Yeah, most definitely. So let's go ahead and ladies and gentlemen, I know this is a lot of flashcard type stuff, but I really remember that you need to learn the language, so we need to be talking about some of these committees. The last few that I lift, the first one in this list, I do believe is still important, and even if you never do anything inside of coding or programming or HTML, I would know who W3C is. WWW Consortium, that's, they are the ones that do voluntary standards. And I'm going to go ahead and just take this away. International group, developing our standards for the World Wide Web. The other ones we have is, and I can never remember IEC, it's the Electrotechnical Communication. And I don't have it up here. Yeah, so it's an international story. So they are the kind of like the UK of the ISO, right? And it's the International Techno-Electrical Committee. That's it. I got it eventually. So they are kind of what we see in Europe is what the ISO is. And that's why you will see a lot of the ISO will have a /IEC. They're working together. And that's the IEC endorses that specification as well.
Gotcha.
ETSI is another one here. When we talk about ETSI, I just went ahead and threw this one in. This is the European Telecommunication Standards Institute. Again, not sure. Again, if you're in Europe, remember that networking is worldwide. That's why I put some of these in here. And the last one is the ITU. I don't know if any of these would ever show up in an exam environment or if you would need them in a help desk situation. I will tell you, I would know the first one because you might come up against something that you need to know. The last one is the ITU. This one is the United Nations agency, right? They're responsible for something for their ICT here. And I always forget, as good as I am with acronyms, the UK, Information and Communication Technology, they abbreviate the whole thing ICT over in Europe. And I don't know that one. But there you go. So those are some variety of standards. Again, like I said, this is flashcards. You could probably save yourself a lot of time. We wanted to give you the explanation as to why you would know each one of these. But at the end of the day, if you need to pause the video, make some flashcards, you'll be doing well doing that.
I love it. So a lot of acronyms, of course, in this episode for these various standards bodies. And as Wes alluded to, we will encounter examples of these as we go deeper into networking topics. So it'll be great for you to have this initial kind of data dump of all of these important organizations, but we'll be driving the point home because we mention specific bodies and specific documents in the more detailed areas of the course. Well, thank you so much for joining us in this episode, introducing to you this whole concept of network standardization and the organizations that make it possible.